All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Unhidden Podcast. It's me, Drew, and
Lorena here for another episode of interesting talks about everything that has to do with autism. So, Drew, what do we have for today's episode?
today we are talking about relationships on the spectrum.
Oh, big topic. I think big topic for both of us, but I think it's gonna be an entertaining one. More than interesting, I think this one is gonna be entertaining. So let's see how it goes.
Yeah. So, Lorena, let's start with you.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to ask myself questions. So let's start with you.
Okay.
How were your relationships when you were young? Because we know that you got diagnosed later in life.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the, just describe relationships in general when you were young and how you experienced them and challenges you had around relationships. Yeah. We'll talk both friendships and, as later in life, we'll get to later in the life dating stuff later, but let's start with friendships when you were younger.
I was going to start there naturally because I think it's the one that I have more, again, and in operations, data, right? It's the one that I have more data on. Let's say it like that. And so I think I struggled most of my childhood because I never really found the other kids interesting enough. I think I got bored very easily. And as a kid, I was also, I don't think it has to do with autism per se, but I was a weird kid where I didn't like dolls or the regular toys, right? I didn't like, also the boy toys were not interesting to me. I was very interested, for example, in animals.
Okay.
I was that kid that my mother, I remember she gave me this white gorilla, like the stuffed gorilla, and my father was this very Mexican guy that says why do you buy those things to the kid? Buy her some girl stuff, And I never really liked it. And so those were kind of the starting points. So when you're a kid, naturally, you play with the toys of your neighbor, of your cousins, of your siblings. And I never really found any toys interesting. And so that's when it started to become a little interesting. And then at school, it started to present more and more. Now that I see it as an adult, they're like, oh, this is it. I think I never really got a friend until, probably the first friend that I remember, his name was Giancarlo. And probably I was around 9, 10. And it was one friend, right? And in those years, at my school, it was very funny because the younger kids would go to break at a certain time, and then the older ones could go 30 minutes later or something like that, because both of them were in the same school. And so I remember that my sister, who is 2 years older than me, she would come and pick me up in my classroom, and then I would eat my lunch with her and her friends, right? And this happened a lot of years. And so I never really had friends, and I was a kid that of course, I was bullied. I was very tiny in size, which is surprising because now if you see me in person, I'm a very tall woman. And it was very funny because I didn't eat. We'll talk about this in another episode, but I had all the symptoms or signals that now we know autism is present at. So I was anemic, so I was tiny, little, and so the kids could bully me and all these things. And so I think then in my teenage years, I think that's when I started to develop, okay, I might be pursuing one or two friends. And so I started to have a little group of friends. But the interesting thing that I know you and I have talked about is they seem to have expiration dates. And in me, it was very clear that after a year, I would change that friend. And then another year, and this was until like probably all high school. Like when I started to develop like friends, I only have like 2 friends that were friends until today. But in general, it was kind of like a yearly thing where like after the year, I would find like a new best friend or like a new. So that's kind of like on the friendship side. And before we go to the romantic stuff, I think I want to hear your point of view as the Drew as a kid and how did you experience. And even again, like I want to also hear your relationships with family, because we have this idea that relationships are people outside of your nuclear family. But I think everything applies the same. I know people that their best friends in life were cousins. And I found that always very interesting. So what was with you? How was your life?
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, you were talking and I was like, this sounds very familiar. I was the stereotypical, when you think of, I went to grade school, elementary school in the 80s, and I was the stereotypical 80s nerd. I was also little. I had skipped a grade. I had big, thick Coke bottle glasses. I wear contact lenses now because my glasses are massive and super uncomfortable. And so, I was just that stereotypical nerd, right? And so like I got picked on, I got bullied, I had all that going on. I think I got my first friend, I think in first grade. And we were like, he didn't have any friends and I didn't have any friends. We were just the 2 of us. Right. And then I think it was like third grade. I met another friend. And so now we had like 3 of us now. And so we were all kind of like tight. And then that lasted all the way up until that was like my friend group up until like junior high school.
Okay.
And then in junior high, I met a couple of other people, but to the same thing, like anybody outside of those 2, they were very short-term friendships. It was, a 6-month friendship, a year friendship, and then you kind of just lose contact and drift apart and go your separate ways. And if you happen to see each other at school, you'd be like, oh, hey, how's it going? Most of the time. Sometimes it was like they got into the cool kids crowd and you weren't in the cool kids crowd, so you weren't allowed to talk to them, know? So I think so I kind of bounced around with like mostly just like 1 or 2 friends that were consistent. And then otherwise it was, a rotating cast of different people that would come and go all the way through probably until probably till like the very end of my senior year of high school, when I started actually hanging out with like a group of people. And it was really like a new group of people that just kind of like adopted me into their group. And so that was my first experience really like, having a group of friends. And even then, and I think, and we'll get to later stages as we get into the podcast, but like, even then, I think it was an interesting dynamic because it felt like one of the people in the group was like my real friend. The rest were like, they were all part of the group and we would hang out and stuff, but like, I didn't interact with them nearly as much as I interacted with the one guy that was like my good friend. So there, even within the group, there was this almost like we're friends, and then these are your friends, and they allow me to hang out, right? Like that's kind of how that went. And it was kind of weird, and so that was kind of like my friend situation. You mentioned.
I think exactly like similar things, but I also want to know, when you did spend time with this one friend, like do you have any idea or can you remember back from those years an average amount of time that you were able to be with that one friend in any given day? Like, was there a time component when you were like, this is kind of it? After an hour, I can't do it. or no?
I don't think I ever had that experience with like my good friends.
Uh-huh.
Like if I was like really tight with somebody, I could spend hours with
Okay.
them, hours. Now, if it was somebody that wasn't like really tight with and was just an acquaintance with, then yeah, there was kind of an expiration time on how long we could spend together before my battery would be drained. But like when I had like a really, really tight friendship with somebody, like there's no limit. It could be, we spend an entire weekend together. Like I would do
Oh,
sleepovers at his house. He would do sleepovers at my house. Like, we were, you know, yeah, we'd be together a lot. What about
that
you?
was
Like,
no.
no?
That was my no. I mean, it's funny because my family in general, my parents, especially my mother, didn't really believe in sleepovers. Like I think that's not a particular thing in Mexico. Like I know it exists in Mexico, but it's not like a big thing where you go and spend the night in someone else's house. Or at least in my family, that was not the case. But for me, I do remember, I mean, also we've talked about my obsession with time since I was like very, very little. I do remember that component of, I didn't count time the way I do it now as an adult, but I do remember that after certain time lapses, I could disappear for a little bit and then I could go to the bathroom and then start counting things for a little bit. I mean, we already talked that I count a lot. I didn't know counting was not a thing for everyone. But now
Yeah.
as I'm an adult, I remember that I used to go, like with even when we were with my cousins, like we were often with them and in my grandparents' house. I remember that I was like, wait a minute, and I could go a little bit to the other room, and I think that still applies today. Even if it's my favorite friend in the world, which I have a few now, a lot more intentional. I think a weekend is a thing that I really, really have to prepare for. It doesn't come organically even at my 37 years old, right? As
Yeah.
where you are describing it as if it was my favorite person, I would totally spend the weekend. For me, that was always, how do I navigate this? But
Yeah.
tell me, I'm very curious on knowing how did you as you were growing up and as you started to see other people with other relationship patterns, if you copy pasted something from them and brought it to your life because you saw a life that was more what you wanted. And so if you started to kind of bring some of those behaviors to your own life.
Yeah, I mean, I've always watched people a lot. I've always been a very like big people watcher and just observe how people behave. And I think that, you try to, you see somebody that's like super friendly and you see somebody that's like got tons of friends. And you're like, oh, how do they do that? And so I would look at those people and yeah, I mean, I would try to emulate, or mimic something that I thought made them friendly and stand out and, and have people gravitate towards them. And it never worked. So it was, yeah, I totally did that. 100%. What about you? Did you do that?
But I think I succeeded at a certain degree until the point that today people that know, maybe not today because now I live by, like I'm far from my family. I don't know if I've talked about this in this podcast particularly, but I'm very away from my family for 14 years already, physically, not like I'm very close to my family, but I've been in San Francisco by myself for the last 14 years. But if you would like people in college, they would tell me, oh my God, you smile exactly like your sister. Or like when you would pick up the phone, it was kind of the same voice. And I know this happens in families where like the sisters kind of have a similar tone of voice. But I think even some mannerisms, like I started to pick from my father, right? And then from my sister. and then a little bit from like the people that I could see around me. And I think part of that is, yeah, simply genetics. And I think another part is very intentional, where I started to see what worked and what didn't work. I do remember that my father, when I was very little, he would always tell me, like, look at me in the eyes, look at me in the eyes. And for me, it was like a amount of pressure that I was like, why? Like, it just feels so uncomfortable and so unnatural. But I think I succeeded, because to that point, I think now I could actually say I'm stellar at connecting with people in my own terms, again. But I think the expectation that people would even come to my wedding was always like a really wild dream, right? I always said, well, no, for example, in Mexico, they have the sweet 15, when in the US is the sweet 18.
Yeah.
For us is a 15. And oh my God, Drew, it was such a stressful moment in my life. And I remember it like super clearly, because for my sister, my father threw this huge party in like a huge hotel, and like the big dress, and like a million friends and all the family. And then my time would come 2 years later, and I was like, oh, mother of God. Like, I don't like the attention. I don't have friends, or I do have friends, but I don't have a friends to fill up a freaking hotel, right?
Yeah.
And so my sweet 15 was a dinner with my family in a really nice restaurant and my one friend, and that's it. And so the expectation that Lorena, the Lorena adult, was going to have like the big wedding and all these things, that they put the chip on you, especially in Latin American families, where like everything is a celebration and everything is like a big celebration, I thought was not on the cards for me. And surprisingly, at my wedding, like most of our guests were people that I consider friends, and that they have gone through different stages of my life. And it was almost like a badge of honor, right? Where I was like, I don't want my parents to die worried that I don't have friends and that I am alone, because that was a conversation, at least with my mother at some point, and my father as well. Both of them were kind of like surprised of like, 1 year I would appear with a friend, and then the next year that friend would not be in my life anymore. And both of them being very social, it was a worrisome for them. And so for me, that was kind of my thing, where I always thought, I don't want them to worry for me, because for me it feels fine, but I still want them to have peace of mind. And so, yeah, my wedding, I consider that one of the biggest badges of honor that I've carried in my life, in my adult life.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, that's really cool to hear. So what was so you mentioned you wanted to get into this, so and we haven't really talked about it yet. Mm-hmm. What was the kind of relationship with your family like? So, you mentioned like friends with cousins and stuff like that. Like, what was your relationship with your family like?
I think I was always the difficult granddaughter, the difficult niece, the difficult everything, right? Because I didn't like to be carried. Until today, it's very hard that I accept a hug from everyone. And same thing, Latin American family, where since you're a very little girl, it's like you have to say hi with a kiss and a hug to freaking everyone, and the creepy uncle that you haven't seen in 5 years. That thing, Drew, for me was like, I don't understand, why do I have to go and kiss this person? It's like, I don't. So I was always a difficult one. And even with my father, he, a very strong man and big guy, and like kind of scary at first. I had trouble with him, because he always wanted to be hugged and like these things. And I was like, he had to ask me for hugs and these things. And I would only be carried as a kid by my mother and the nanny, and that's it. That's it. Nobody else could, or I would cry, or I would do something, and I was always kind of the difficult girl. And then with my grandparents, the same. My two siblings, very close to both of them. And for me, it was just like I need to go back to my mother and to my safe space and to the couch and to reading my books and to like doing this and listening to my music. And then with my cousins, I guess it was kind of the same, right? Like I do believe that one thing translates to every single part of your life. I don't know how you experience it. I know that you don't have siblings, right? But you did have. You
I do. Yeah.
And you do have cousins as well. So what was that for you?
So for me, my brother's 2.5 years older than me.
Okay.
We were not close growing up. We fought like cats and dogs.
Okay.
We did not get along. And I mean like verbal fighting and physical fighting.
Yeah.
Like, and he's neurotypical. And he's very friendly, very gregarious. He's outgoing. He has no problem just walking up to anybody and talking to him. He works in sales. He is what you think of when you think of a good sales rep. They're just constantly meeting new people and talking to new people. He's always got new friends, and he keeps friends forever. And he's got all these friend groups, and they're all different groups, and he just navigates between them, and it's seamless. Whereas for me, I was very different, right? So in our house, I was growing up. We had, it was my parents, my brother, and I. We grew up in an athletic family, so we grew up playing sports.
Okay.
We both played my brother and I both played baseball and football, American football.
Okay, that's
and
distinction. Uh-huh.
Yep, just in case. It was, my parents were both very heavily involved in our teams, and so my parents were very involved and had a great relationship with my parents, and still do to this day.
Okay.
My brother and I, once we got older and became adults, we kind of figured things out and actually became really close. So now to this day, I'm really close with my brother. Now, with my extended family, so I have a fairly large extended family. My mom is one of 8 kids. All her brothers and sisters have kids. So I've got Irish Catholic family. So so I've got lots of cousins. Most of my aunts and uncles are still here in the Phoenix area. Some had moved out, but most of them had stayed fairly close if they had moved. So I grew up, and when we would go to Thanksgiving and Christmas, it'd be 25, 30 people, just family.
Oh.
Massive, family gatherings. And we had 2 cousins. One cousin was almost exactly my brother's age, and another cousin that was almost exactly my age, both women. We would hang out at family gatherings, but we didn't hang out outside of family gatherings very much, if at all.
Okay.
And then, my younger cousins, there was kind of an age gap between me and the next cousin down. And when we were young, we didn't really spend too much time together. Even when we got older, we really didn't spend too much time together. So I've always had this kind of like, I love my family and proud to be a part of my family, and it's a great environment. But I never really had close relationships with my cousins. Okay. What I will say is all my aunts and uncles and my grandparents absolutely adored me because I was the best behaved kid out of all of them. You could put me in a room and be like, Drew, go entertain yourself. And I'd entertain myself for 4 hours. So they loved the fact that they didn't have to worry about me getting into trouble. They didn't have to worry about me causing problems. You could just put me somewhere. I'd be fine. So the adults all adored me. They all loved me. My grandparents, particularly my grandfather, he was at that time like my like my hero at the time. I mean, my dad was also my hero, but my grandfather was just this amazing man, and he really valued education and intelligence. And he was like, "You're going to be the doctor in the family. You're going to be the scientist in the family. You're going to be whatever." And he had these lofty goals and dreams for me. But he loved, he probably loved me more than any of the rest of the family. And he was crazy because you want to talk about a friendly person. You want to talk about somebody that could make friends and create relationships. This guy, we would do a lot of these like camping trips where we would go, my parents had an RV, my grandparents had an RV, and we would go take the RVs over to like San Clemente Beach in California and spend a week camped on the beach. And as you're there, other people, it's a big, huge trailer park, and there's other trailers coming in and out and in and out. By the end of the second day, my grandfather knew everybody in that trailer park. He knew every single person in there. He knew their backstories. He knew everything about their history. And every time they saw him, they'd be like, "Don, how you doing?" They just wanted to spend more time with him. And I was like, how do I do that? How do I do that? Never could figure it out. Never could learn it. But this man could make friends with anybody. And it's one of the things that, like, even to this day, I still admire about him. He passed many, many years ago, but I still admire it about him, how he was just, he could turn anybody he met into a lifelong friend. It was crazy.
But you see what you just did there? Like, I feel like that's another thing. Like, just the fact that you remember observing that behavior and wanting it. I think 90% of the people don't even have these memories of their younger years. Because I think that observant mode that I think we have activated so early in life, it's exactly what makes us who we are, right? Like, yeah. And it's funny that you said, like, I never really learned it, but I knew I saw something that I was very curious about and that I was interested in, and I tried. I just didn't succeed, but I tried. And just the fact that you say, I watched it and I caught it and I remember it now, I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting. He was a great guy. It's funny too, because he could spend hours and hours and hours getting to know somebody, and then as soon as he was done with that, he'd go put his headphones on, grab his metal detector, and go spend 4 hours going up and down the beach with a metal detector trying to find anything he could find, all by himself. He was like a chameleon. He could just adapt to whatever situation and was perfectly fine with it.
I think that rolls out perfectly on, let's talk a little bit about the second degree of relationships, which is the romantic relationships, right? I think the audience is going to want to know, what do you remember as your early experiences on being interested in someone more than a friend? Or if you even caught it, what are you and what were you as, like, flirting and all those things that are so, I think, stressful, honestly. How were you and how are you today?
What's flirting? I'm not sure I understand this.
I learned it. I learned it. I was like these memes of like, I'm today's years old when I learned that avocados are whatever, like I think I was 30 something years when I knew I was actively flirting with someone, and I just didn't. Someone else had to cut it for me and explain it to me in order for me to say, okay, this is it. So tell me, how was it for you?
I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure I've ever successfully flirted with anybody in my entire life. I think that's, I think I can pretty much say that.
Out of the door.
I mean, I remember, so again, I'm going to go back to, like, I've got this weird memory. I'm going to go back to first grade, which I had skipped a grade. So I was 5 years old in first grade. And I remember there was a girl in first grade that I thought was cute. And when she would come anywhere near me, like my entire body would just freeze up. Like I would just lock up. So that was the first kind of inkling that I had that like, I thought a girl was cute, right? Third grade, I had a crush on this girl. And in third grade was when like people were starting to do like the whole like, ooh, we're going steady thing. At least where I was, in here in Phoenix. I had this crush on this girl, and my mom thought it would be cute on Valentine's Day if I got her like a little gift bag and put like, some cute stuff in it, like stickers and pens and pencils and like a little stuffed animal thing. And so we went to the store and we went to the Hallmark store and picked out all the stuff and put it in the bag. And I walked over to her house. We lived in the same neighborhood. And I walked over to her house and I'm terrified. And I knocked on the door. I think her dad came to the door and I was like, "Is Melissa home?" And I had the bag behind my back and he went and got her and I gave her the bag and she was like, "I don't know what to do with this." And so I kind of like turned and walked away because I'm like, I don't know what to do now. It actually ended up being a fairly negative experience for me because later that day, I was riding my bike around the neighborhood and I happened to ride by when like her and her friends were like kind of making fun of that and took the little stuffed animal that I had gifted her and they were like rubbing it in the gutter in the street and basically just destroying the little gift that I got her. And that was not a great experience. And that kind of scarred me for a little bit. And I really tried to like not have anything to do with girls for several years. The first girl that ever called herself my girlfriend was 7th grade. It was when I first got contact lenses.
Okay.
And I started wearing contact lenses to school. And we're standing in line for something. And she's like, "Don't you normally wear glasses?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." And she said, "Do you not need them anymore?" I was like, "No, I got contact lenses." And she's like, "Oh, you're actually pretty cute without your glasses on." And I was like, "What? And then like, the next day she was my girlfriend. And then by the end of that week, she was no longer my girlfriend because I didn't know what that meant. And I didn't know what to do with that information. Like, right. So that was the first girl that ever considered herself my girlfriend. Okay. And then the very next time I ever had like anything with girls at all was my senior year of high school. It was the Sadie Hawkins dance, which I don't know if you know much about like the Sadie Hawkins dance in the US.
I've heard of it, but I am not like that close to it again because I think it's a cultural thing. But
yeah,
tell me about it.
Yeah, so Sadie Hawkins dance is like, think of it as like prom, like high school prom dance, but it's reversed. The girl has to ask the boy. So I got asked I was a senior. I got asked by a sophomore who asked to go to the dance, and I said yes. And it was a disaster. This, I actually don't even remember any, which is weird because I remember like vividly stuff from first grade and third grade, as I've mentioned. This, I got nothing. My brain's completely wiped this. All I know is it was not good. She never spoke to me again afterwards. She did not want anything to do with me afterwards. I don't know what happened, but it was a nightmare. So that was my experience with dating all through the end of high school. So not a lot of success there. Yeah. What about you? I mean, yours is going to be a little bit more complex than mine because you've got like a whole, a whole thing there. So let's talk about yours.
I think, and again, I don't know how much is a association of. I feel like when you consider yourself attractive, it's a combination of different pieces, right? Like you can be attractive physically, but there's also like the personality, but also if you're funny, and it's like a whole compound. And for me, it happened that my siblings are very good looking, right? Since they were like very, very little, and they kind of look alike. And so I feel like the social component where like the physical beauty, that was not something I associated myself until very late in life. When you start to discover like things that are like, wait, I do have this and I do have that and I do have, and then all the personality stuff, it was not great either, right? Because I was very sarcastic. I was very like, you see me at that first sight and probably you're not gonna think I wanna be your friend. And so I think those two things didn't help me much in my teenage years. However, and I think I also understood the only way I would talk to someone for a long period of time is because I already knew that person for a certain period of time, right? And so I think for me, it was not easy, the entire girlfriend-boyfriend situation in high school, because for me, they seemed like kind of boring a little bit. I don't want to say like that, but it was like, why would I spend my time with this person that I kind of don't relate to that much? But I did have a crush, and he knows it, and my wife knows it, and like today he's my best friend, and he went to my wedding, and we've kept the relationship. But it was kind of like my level of understanding with him was so deep, our friendship was so deep that I truly thought I was gonna eventually marry him, like at some point in life. I think that's the kind of the most present that I have, where I truly understood like what was a big, let's call it a big feeling for someone that it's not friendship, no?
Yeah.
But it was very late in life. And then I think I didn't discover that physical attractiveness of myself until I went to live to Argentina, where somehow Mexicans kind of are attractive for Argentinians because, again, I'm tall and like the smile and like these things that I started to kind of say like, oh, I win points for this and I win points for this. And then, and so I think I started to invest in myself in the areas that I considered insecurities, and I got rid of them as early as I could. So, for example, my father is a very hairy guy, like he's pretty much a wolf. And life is so freaking mean that my brother doesn't have hair, which is a guy. But then I got like all the freaking hair of the family from him. And Drew, this was a thing. Like I said, well, man, like you don't want to have hair everywhere. And so, I mean, I've done laser for 25 years already. Like I'm lasered from here to the toe of my finger. Because those things you start, I don't know how much you have worked on yourself on the things that you considered these are no-nos. And so yeah, I don't know how much work you've done on yourself on fixing the things that you consider not attractive for society, but I've done a hell lot of it. And so I think it was until later, and you're right. Like I had a very funny component where now I'm with a woman, and that was an entire different transition that I think we're gonna need a full episode. What I can say on that side is that it didn't surprise me and it was not a thing. Like I'll talk about this in another episode, but I really didn't have a come out story because I am lucky enough that I think my autism helped me understand that I didn't really fully care about the body presentation. I really needed to connect to a different level. That I mean, of course, a person has to be attractive. And until today, like I consider many men very attractive and I consider myself as bisexual. But I think it was an advantage for me to know that it's a human and it's a soul and connect with it the best way that you can.
So I've done some work on some of the insecurities myself,
Okay.
Like you, I was very small. I graduated high school at 5'9", 130 pounds, which is pretty damn thin for a guy at 5'9".
That high, yeah.
Particularly somebody that like I played football. Like I wasn't like just sitting in the library. Like I played football, so it's tiny. So being that small was always a big, insecurity for me. So like, I hit the gym, and I mean, I'm certainly no bodybuilder. I'm certainly no, I don't have a six pack, but I'm a lot bigger than I used to be. And most of that's muscle, a lot of that's muscle. Okay. The glasses and the contacts thing, like my glasses, like they're so thick you can see behind me when you're looking at me. I was always insecure about my glasses, so contacts. The minute I was able to get contacts, I got contacts. I would say even the beard adds a little, covers a little bit of the insecurity there. Like, so I've definitely worked on some of the things for sure. Yeah.
I think we're gonna need an entire different episode to now talk another component, like work. And I think like to like this for me is super interesting too, because I feel like for me relationships, again, is not one separate thing. I think I'm very intentional in each one of the areas. And I think like the last thing that I wanna say on my experience is that I feel there was always a component on like the people that I ended up dating. They were my really good friends. And so, I mean, until San Francisco and then the apps and all of that. But like the people that I ended up dating, there was a strong friendship component in every single one. So I find that for example, like one night stands, like those things, I was never good at it. Like I never really could do it because it was a tremendous high effort in every single aspect, right? So
yeah,
I think no coincidence. Every single thing connects to each other, and I think that's what it is. But anything else you wanna add on this episode on relationships and like the fun that we had as kids and now as an adult?
No, but I feel like we could do like another episode just about relationships as an adult, because we spent so much time talking about our childhoods that like we really haven't even talked that much about like adulthood and relationships. So let's keep that in our back pocket for another one. And interestingly enough, we're recording this right now, and as soon as this is done, I have to go get ready for a date. So we'll see how that goes.
And Drew is going to tell us how that goes in the next episode. So just to stay tuned.
Oh, boy.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Drew, as always. Catch you in the next episode.
Thank you, everybody.